Over to your kids.
Gospel according to John, chapter 4. Jesus knew that the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John. Though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually, he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime.
Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food.
The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?"
Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water."
"But, sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoy?"
Jesus replied, "Anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life."
"Please, sir," the woman asked, "give me this water. Then I'll never be thirsty again and I won't have to come here to get water."
"Go and get your husband," Jesus told her.
"I don't have a husband," the woman replied.
Jesus said, "You're right, you don't have a husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth."
"Sir," the woman said, "you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshipped?"
Jesus replied, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him. For salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed, it's here now, when true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father the Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth."
The woman said, "I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us."
Then Jesus told her, "I am the Messiah."
Just then, his disciples came back. They were shocked to find him talking to a woman, but none of them had the nerve to ask, "What do you want with her?" or "Why are you talking to her?"
The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah?" So the people came streaming from the village to see him.
Meanwhile, the disciples were urging Jesus, Rabbi, eat something.
But Jesus replied, I have a kind of food you know nothing about.
Did someone bring him food while we were gone? The disciples asked each other.
Then Jesus explained, the nourishment comes from doing the will of God, who sent me, and from finishing his work. You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest. But I say, wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe for harvest. The harvesters are paid good wages, and the fruit they harvest is people brought to eternal life. What joy awaits both the planter and the harvester alike. You know the saying, one plants and the other harvests. And it's true. I sent you to harvest where you didn't plant. Others had only done the work. And now you will get to gather the harvest.
Many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus because the woman had said, He told me everything I ever did.
When they came out to see him, they begged him to stay in their village. So he stayed for 2 days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe.
Then they said to the woman, Now we believe, not just because you told us, but because we have heard him ourselves. Now we know that he is indeed the Savior of the world.
The incident of Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman was recorded only by John the Apostle, while the other authors did not mention it. John's style of writing is mostly reflective, unlike Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where Matthew, Mark, and Luke adopt more of a narrative style. Narrative style is a usual style of storytelling, focusing only on the main incident. What is reflective style? In addition to the main incident, John includes other details that happened before or after, as well as add some sort of his own commentary to the incident. While doing so, he builds up a drama and intrigue. So when we read Gospel of John, well, this is applicable to any book of Bible, we need to pay close attention to some of the tidbits of information which might look irrelevant, but actually help us to understand the passage better. So he sets up the context in the beginning of the chapter as Jesus hurrying from Judea back to Galilee. Most of us know the geography of the promised land at that time. So we have Galilee at the northern part, and then the southern region, Judea, and sandwiched between them is a large area called Samaria. So Jesus has cut through from Judea to Galilee through the region of Samaria. And John says he had to go through this, which means usually Jews don't take that route. They go roundabout, they cross the Jordan towards east, and then cut back the Jordan again once they reach Galilee. So they try to avoid their best, the region of Samaria, and go back and forth between Galilee and Judea. So the context is Jesus is rushing back to Galilee, probably to avoid some confrontation with the Pharisees. That is when we see one of the most vivid scenes in the Gospels. We see misunderstanding. The woman misunderstands the spiritual water Jesus talks about with the physical water. We see irony. Just picturize the woman asking Jesus, are you greater than Jacob? And seemingly a sudden change of topic in verse 19. Instead of discussing about the personal life, I can discuss about a place to worship. And then John switches the backstage to the front stage. The woman moves to the village and we see what is happening in the village. And again, a quick swap of the front stage to backstage where disciples come onto the stage and they're puzzled, but have no nerve or no guts to ask Jesus what is happening. And then John puts everyone onto the stage, the entire village on the stage. And all this John is doing to bring out some very, very important truths that would transform the lives of the readers at that time as well as now. One of the prominent lessons that we can learn from this narrative is about the barriers that are broken. A Jewish rabbi talking to a woman in public without her male companion. Another barrier, a Jew talking to a Samaritan. The social, ethnic, and religious barriers are all wiped out in this one single interaction. Yet there is another prominent theme that we can observe and which we'll try to observe today. If you go back to verse 20, 19 and 20, we see the woman asking Jesus a very serious question. Sir, you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it is here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worship? This is from New Living Translation. Some of the other translations like NIV don't mention the place Mount Gerizim. It just says, we Samaritans insist here in this mountain is where we worship. So to paraphrase the woman's question, she's asking Jesus, which place to worship? Is this the mountain or the other one at Jerusalem, which you people claim? How significant is this question? Is it just about choosing a mountain nearby based upon your convenience or something else? Why is it such a big deal if a Jew engages with a Samaritan? And John ends the story by saying, many villagers came and begged Jesus to stay with them. Is it a really big deal, or is John making it such a big deal out of nothing? Of some villagers asking Jesus to stay with them. These questions we can answer by paying attention to the tidbits of information that John is giving. So let us retrace few of these words that we see. The first one is about the place Sychar, which John mentions, the place where the conversation is taking place. And he said that is closer to the place where Jacob gave a plot to his son Joseph and Joseph's sons. And that place is called Shechem. We see in Genesis chapter 33, verses 18 onwards, where this was Jacob coming back from his job with his father-in-law back to the Canaan. And there he buys a piece of land which belongs to a family. And there he built an altar to God. And that place is Shechem. And later, when Jacob was dying, we see in Genesis chapter 48 that he gives this, he bequeaths this to Joseph and his sons. And that is the portion that Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh inherited. Same place, Shechem. And when the Israelites came back from Egypt, they carried the bones of Joseph and buried them in this very land which Joseph got inheritance from Jacob, and that is also Shechem. So the area is a very prominent, significant place for Jews. And if we trace back to Genesis chapter 12, we see that this was the very first place that Abraham pitched his tent once he entered Canaan. That's what we see in chapter 12 of Genesis and verse 6. And Abraham traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up the camp beside the oak of Moreh. So we see the place where Jesus is having a conversation with the Samaritan woman was very, very significant for those people right from the very origin. They were able to trace back this significance of this place to the very origin, which is Abraham coming to the land of Canaan. What about this Mount Gerizim? Again, if you go back to Deuteronomy, chapters 11, 27, and 28, I put some verses on the screen. You can note down these references and check later if you have time. So Moses is giving a very detailed order to Israelites. They were about to go into the land of Canaan and conquer the land. So he says, you have to set up a ceremony of blessing and curses. It is something like renewing the covenant with God. So verse 29, when the Lord your God brings you into the land and helps you to take possession of it, you must pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and curse at Mount Ebal. These two mountains are west of the Jordan River in the land of Canaanites who live in the Jordan Valley near the town of Gilgal, not far from the oaks of Moreh. Verse 27. That same day, Moses also gave this charge to the people. When you cross Jordan, the river, the tribes of Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin must stand on Mount Gerizim to proclaim blessing over the people. And the tribes of Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali must stand on the Mount of Ebal to proclaim a curse. And they did obey it to the letter. We see in Joshua chapter 8, 30 to 34, that Joshua builds an altar to the Lord on Mount Ebal, and he followed the commands that Moses, the Lord's servant, has written in the book of instruction. Verse 33. Then all the Israelites, foreigners and native born alike, along with the elders, officers, and judges, were divided into two groups. One group stood on the front of Mount Gerizim, the other on the front of Mount Ebal. Each group faced the other, and between them stood the Levitical priests carrying the ark of the Lord's covenant. Verse 34. Joshua then read to them all the blessings and curses. It is interesting to see, to picturize people standing on two different mountains facing one another. How does it look like the geography? So this is the place where we are talking about. This is Shechem, and this is Gerizim, and this is Ebal. So this is a photo, a modern photo taken from viewing towards Gerizim from Mount Ebal. I was really intrigued about people standing on two mountains and able to listen to one another. Is it really possible, especially during those times? So this is a screenshot of Google Earth looking east. So you have Ebal on the left and Mount Gerizim on the right, and this is the valley of Shechem. So archaeologists write, the valley between these two is one of the most beautiful in Palestine. The width of the valley is about a third of the mile. The summits of the two mountains in the lap of which it lies are about 2 miles apart. What is remarkable is that where the two mountains face each other and touch most closely, with a green valley of 500 yards between, each is hollowed out, and the limestone stratum of each is broken into a succession of ledges, so as to present appearance of a series of regular benches. Thus, a natural amphitheater is formed, capable of containing a vast audience of people, and the acoustic properties are so perfect in that dry and rainless air that Canon Tristram speaks of two of his party taking up positions on the opposite mountains, reciting the commandments antiphonally and hearing each other perfectly. So this is the place where Jesus is engaging a conversation with this woman from the village of Sychar, and the place is of heavy significance to the people of that land. So what about Samaria? Samaria is the area that formerly belonged to the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, as we read in Genesis, where Jacob bequeaths his portion to Joseph and his sons. But later, we see that the kingdom is divided. We see in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 16, during the time of Rehoboam, son of Solomon, the kingdom broke into two. The southern kingdom, with the two tribes of Judah and Benjamin, with Jerusalem as their capital, is called the kingdom of Judah, or the southern kingdom. And the northern kingdom, Israel, has as its capital Shechem. Probably the name Samaria was first mentioned in 1 Kings chapter 16, where Omri was the seventh king to rule over the northern kingdom, and he buys a piece of land from a owner called Shemer and builds on it a city called Samaria. Later, when these northern tribes were carried away to Assyria, the king of Assyria sent people from Assyrian regions. We see in 2 Kings chapter 17. These foreigners come and settle in this region, and they intermarry with the remnant Israelites in that land. These were called Samaritans, and they continued to worship the idols of their own religions. But then something interesting happens in chapter 17 of 2 Kings, where a lot of lions start coming and attacking these people in Samaria. And they thought that is because they are not appeasing the God of the territory. So they put a petition to Assyrian king, and Assyrian king identifies a Jewish priest from Assyria, deputes the person to go back to this region and instruct the people there about the Jewish religion so that they can be saved from the attacks of the lion. So they were taught from the book of Moses, but they added the book of Moses to their religion and continued in their own idolatrous customs. So what happened was a new religion evolved, a religion which is a mixture of Judaism and idolatry. And that is the reason why Samaritans were generally despised by Jews, because Jews make it very strict that they shall not worship any other god. The animosity of Samaritans with Jews continued. Actually, if you read the book of Nehemiah later, we see Jews coming back from the captivity of Babylon with a approval from the king that they can rebuild the temple and the city of Jerusalem. Samaritans vigorously attempted to halt the construction. The leader of Samaritans was Sanballat the Horonite. We read about him in the book of Nehemiah, chapters 4, 6, and 16, where it is not just a protest. They did whatever they can to stop the construction of the temple and the city. They were angry and they were mocking the Jews. And they were saying the wall you are going to build will collapse with the weight of a fox if it starts walking on the wall. So please take a note of these scriptures, Nehemiah chapter 6, chapter 4, and chapter 2, and see the animosity of the Samaritans towards the Jews, especially when Jews started coming back to the Holy Land. Sorry. Not only that they were against rebuilding of the temple, in competition, they made a temple for themselves on Mount Gerizim. And it is this temple that they insist to be the right place to worship because they think it was designated by Moses based on the revelation from God. And Sanballat set up his own son-in-law as a high priest there, and it continued for some time. So tracing back, Samaritans' origins were mixed, religion is mixed, but they draw from the legacy of Abraham, Jacob, Moses, and Joshua. Politically, they're opposing to Jews, and they continued the animosity. How high was his animosity when it came to the time of Jesus? Take a look at Luke chapter 9, verses 51 to 56. Luke 9, 51 onwards. I'm reading from NLT. As the time drew near for Jesus to ascend to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. He sent messengers ahead to a Samaritan village to prepare for his arrival. But the people of the village did not welcome Jesus because he was on his way to Jerusalem. When James and John saw this, they said to Jesus, "Lord, shall we call down fire from heaven and burn them up?" Jesus turned and rebuked them, so they went on to another village. So here we see Jesus coming from Galilee and proceeding towards Jerusalem. And when the villagers on the way, a Samaritan village, knew about this, they blocked his way because Jerusalem is a non-entity. There is nothing great about Jerusalem. The worship should have in Gerizim. So that's why we see in chapter 4 of John, when a village of Samaria comes and begs Jesus to stay with them, it is really, really a big deal. So now, the question is, what is the place to worship? We Samaritans claim Mount Gerizim is the place to worship. You Jews claim that God appointed Jerusalem to be the place where temple is to be built. So who is right? Who is wrong? Where is it we can worship? So the question is not about choosing a place of convenience, the shorter place to go, nearest place to go, but it is about deep and strong belief from ages together, traced back right to Abraham. It is not a matter of convenience, but a strong belief. So this is where we come to a very, very unique way of Jesus answering questions. I would say it is a relevant answer to a relevant question. What is the question? The question is where to worship. The answer is where to worship is not at all relevant. Whom to worship and how to worship, that is the question that we all have to find answer. So Jesus gives a very explicit answer. It doesn't matter anymore where you worship, neither Jerusalem nor Gerizim. and the time is here now. Why? Whom do you worship? The God you worship is spirit and truth. So the worshippers also should do it in spirit and truth. What is worship? The acts of praise and worship is just one dimension to worship. They are the physical acts of singing, praising, praying, and dancing. They're physical acts. But the God who we worship is beyond time, matter, and space. If we restrict this God to a specific time and to a specific place, we are not doing a proper worship. It is an incomplete worship. Worship is response to the nature of the person whom we worship. And that we do not just in a physical space, in a physical time, but through our spirit. So worship is a response to the nature of whom you worship. Whom we worship is spirit, and we cannot restrict our worship to time, matter, and space. God is also truth. Truth to oneself and true to God, that should be the defining characteristic of worship. Worshipping the true God itself is declaration of truth. Declaration of truth is worshipping the true God. It is not a one-time act. It is a continuous activity. In other words, it's our lifestyle. And worshipping God in spirit and truth, always together, they cannot be separated. And knowing truth is possible only by knowing God, his nature, especially his love towards us. Are we concerned with where to worship God? Or are we driven to know the God whom we worship so that our worship is meaningful? Only a personal knowledge of God would help us to know the truth, which he is. And only the truth of knowing about this God can liberate us beyond the physical constraints of time, matter, and space and worship him. Only then can we worship God in spirit and truth. Physical places are important. Meeting in a place is important because that helps us, facilitates a lot of other things. But we cannot be constrained with that. Activities of singing and praying are important because that help us to adore God through our mouths verbally, but that's not enough. As we read in Romans chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, I quote, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable." This truly is the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Where to worship is not important. Whom to worship and how to worship is important. We worship a God who is spirit and truth, who revealed his nature, his loving nature to us. And we respond by worshiping this God in spirit and truth through our entire lifestyle. As we spend some time on this, meditate upon this, let us get into a time of reflection and prepare ourselves for communion. because that is another form of worshiping God by obeying Him. As you get ready your elements, let us sing a song as Naima leads us.
text on ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. He's talking about worship, like
pass me not, O gentle Savior. Hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Let me at thy throne of mercy find a sweet relief, kneeling there in deep contrition. Help my unbelief. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Trusting only in thy merit, would I seek thy face. Heal my wounded, broken spirit. Save me by thy grace. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Thou, the spring of all my comfort, more than life to me. Whom have I honored beside thee? Whom in heaven but thee? Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry. While on others thou art calling, do not pass me